What's going on? What's going on? Good morning. Good morning. This is basically a redo of what I did yesterday. So, not that anybody probably saw it yesterday, but like an idiot, I mistakenly deleted the wrong video. So, we gotta do it all over again. Don't be racist. This is not gonna press them to jump right in. There's three. I'm no scholar, but I've kind of identified, being a person of African American descent, a black man, if you will, in America, learning about history and living in the South, living in the Mid Atlantic, moving around. I've lived in permanently for two states, but I've also lived temporarily in New York for a summer. Tried that out with some relatives. I've lived in North Carolina. And I visited pretty much, I won't say all 50 states, but I've either driven through or visited, of the lower 48, a good 30 of them. So, in my experience, and also based on research and, of history and contemporary writers, and historical writers, there's three basic. I'm gonna identify three basic forms of racism. Right? These are the big categories. You got your systemic racism, which we're not talking about in this video. Systemic racism is a system, whether overtly or covertly or inadvertently, is racist. It oppresses a minority group based on race. Not talking about that. That's not what we're talking about. Then we're going to talk about, then the second one I would describe as overt personal racism. That's like, somebody calling me a hard R nigger to my face, which I've had before in my life, on more occasions than I'd like to have had. That's when someone, tries to fight you, jump you, physically harm you because of your race, which has happened to me on more occasions than I'd like. Uh, Not talking about that here. Those two are pretty self-explanatory, and if you're not showing, you can just, Google Start Crow, and then start Jim Crow and work your way forward. I would say go back to Reconstruction, but just start at Jim Crow and work your way forward. Those are systems of racism that exist. Every you'll find that these systems still exist. Um, Check out on a sidebar, and this is just on a for the systemic one, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Go to Knowing Better. He has a channel, the channel Knowing Better. Very well vetted, very well thought out, with no real agenda other than the agenda of bringing the truth. But you'll notice in some of these, so I'm from Georgia, and I will tell you that the welfare system is definitely. All right. Think we're good. Yeah, we're good. There. Yeah, go to Knowing Better. Where was I? Go to Knowing Better. Watch his short on welfare. It just breaks it down. It's very complete. And you'll see what I mean about Georgia's welfare system. Now, I'm saying that because I knew that already. What he talked about, I already knew. I also had family members that were on welfare. Um, and for welfare, it took the entire family, basically helping them with small loans and gifts in order to get them over the hump to where they weren't dependent on welfare, um, so that like the father could move back into the house. Um, so that being said, not talking about that. I'm not talking about personal overt racism. What I do want to talk about is the third one, which is I'm going to call it um, covert or unintentional racism. That's when I'm gonna define that the best way I know how it would be is when someone says something that isn't overtly racist. So there's no hard R nigger in there, right? There's no coon. There's no, well, it could be some coon in there, but there's no things that we considered racist statements like welfare queen, you know, dropping n bombs, calling a Hispanic person a spick or a wetback or a Mexican a beaner. Those are overt racism. Covert or unintentional does not include those things. They're purposely intended. They're phrases and statements purposely intended to give someone the appearance of innocence from racism, but while still dog whistling to racists and bullhorning to the person they're oppressing. What do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. So in my county, I live in I'm gonna say a pretty progressive county in Maryland. Howard County. It's one of the most wealthiest counties in the country. Has one of the best education systems in the country. One of the wealthiest in the country, I should say. Um, Extremely diverse. It was a planned community. Um, diversity is an understatement, and it moves. Like right now, we're in the midst of a big wave of African immigrants and families, not necessarily new immigrants, but African families that have immigrated and have moved from wherever they were to Howard County. The same thing with Korean families that have moved around and have settled in Howard County. They're just kind of moving and migrating to that area. They're already here, but they're just moving around. Um, and so that being said, though, we just our first African American and our first female police chief was just promoted this year. I mean, just recently. That's a first. Never happened before. Never had a woman. Never had an African American. So this is a big milestone. So you understand that this is one of the police departments in the state that is relatively free of scandal and corruption. Gets high marks. I've had some questionable run-ins, which I'll talk about on this channel, with Howard County police officers in the past. But I know many Howard County police officers. We've talked, we've discussed. Just go to fuck around. I mean, come on. Sorry. If you watched the earlier video, I generally drive about 10 miles on the highway on my way to work. I drive over the minimum, 11 miles over the minimum speed limit of 45, because I realized by doing the math there's no need for me to speed, but that's a whole other situation. So, we hired this new police chief. She's been with the police department for some time. She's been a captain, a lieutenant. I did a little bit of research since the last time I tried to record this. She has been she started as a patrol resource officer, detective, captain, lieutenant. She's been everything, sergeant. She's worked her way up the ranks, right? She's earned more, and the degrees she holds are kind of ridiculous. The amount of education she's had is absurd. She's definitely earned her way there. First comment under the article: is she truly qualified to be there, or is this going to be another failed experiment? Now, I'm not going to question the motives of the person who wrote that because I don't know. But that literally is a racist statement. That is that is out of the racism playbook. If you're going by the David Duke playbook of racism, this is literally the racist playbook. When you question someone's credentials and you're questioning them, and you make the statement as, is this going to be another failed experiment? Are we doomed? Especially when the article already says how qualified she is. So you either didn't read the article or you disregarded the information in the article. But we live in a country where our culture is steeped like a tea. Tea is mostly water. So we have this culture. It's mostly American. But there's a steeping. One of the tea bags is a racism tea bag. So yes, it's really acknowledge and teach children from the tender age of what racism is, and give them the history and context of things, and actual context, not biased. I've been to school in Georgia, which I'll get to in a second. But actual these types of statements don't come out of people's mouths. We always have to question our motives when we make statements. When you make a statement as if someone's qualified to do a job, or are we doomed for failure, you do need to ask yourself, would you ask the question? Did you ask that question of the last one, of the last police chief, or the police chief before that, or the police chief before that? What about the police chief before that? Did we ever question the credentials of a prior police chief? And I'll tell you the quick answer to that. I've been in this county for over 2 decades, and no one's ever questioned the credentials of a police chief in Howard County, because they've always been white men, and no one's ever questioned their credentials. Didn't even have an associate's degree. No one questioned his credentials. This chick is a couple years away from being a doctor. So I don't think that having a doctorate degree, I don't think that I don't think questioning her credentials is fair at all, and it's racist. That's a racist statement to make. Another form would be this newscaster that was just fired in New York for calling Martin Luther King Day Martin Luther Coon, and I actually saw his statement that he made after he said it. It sounds like he slipped his tongue and said Coon instead of King. But here's the thing: I grew up in Georgia. The term Martin Luther Coon is uniquely Southern. It's very clanny, just to say the least. But it's such an embarrassment because Martin Luther King Jr. is a national hero. If you learn more about him just beyond the civil rights movement, about the choice he made, the statements he made, his commitment, you can say whatever you want about the movement. You can say whatever you want about his methods, but you got for justice more than he did, and basically knew that he was going to die an early death, whether natural or unnatural, because he was unwilling to compromise until his goal was met. That being said, the term Martin Luther Coon is such a stain on Georgia's history that if you go to the Martin Luther King Memorial, if you go to any museum that has anything to do with the civil rights movement in Georgia, if you watch any video that they show, kids in school, the N-bomb, there are some hard R niggers thrown. I've probably heard that on screen and in museums, probably willing to bet 2,000 to 3,000 times. And I'm not saying that lightly. I literally mean that. You go to the Martin Luther King Museum, and any video will have hard R nigger in there. But I'm gonna tell you right now, what's not in there is Martin Luther Coon. As much as they can, video of anybody saying the phrase, the name Martin Luther Coon in regards to King has been removed. It's been completely whitewashed out because it is embarrassing. It's legitimately embarrassing. It's a terrible. As far as racial slurs go, it doesn't even fit. To the accepted use of the term coon, more widely used. It's not even close. Not even close. But it's just embarrassing. So this newscaster slipped the tongue. He said Martin Luther King, and then his response. Now here's where I'm going to take what I said yesterday and kind of amend it and go a little deeper. When you say that, all right, it is racist. You may not. That shit is extremely racist and extremely offensive. You say this newscaster was fired because, come on, seriously, you probably just offended 90% of the people watching your show. This weatherman. 90% of the people, bare minimum, 90%, found that offensive either to them or they just found it offensive in general. That's just a fact. Like you can't go around saying that and think that no one's going to get offended, even if you didn't mean it. Intent is not the issue. Remember, and that's what I want to keep in mind. Intent is not what's at question. I don't think I don't presume that the person that commented about our police chief was intending to be racist, but it is racist, but it is. I don't think this weatherman intended to say something that is embarrassingly racist, but he did. He did. It's demonstrably racist. Like, we could just go back to the first person who ever said it, or find out the origins of that phrase. It's racist. It's not a. It's not a. If you were offended. Now, here's where he went wrong. His response was, he talked about the slip of the tongue. Right? He was reading the teleprompter. He was going real fast. Okay. And he was confusing the words coming up after that and the words before, and he kind of blended together. I've done that, and just for the sake of of being in all disclosure, it could have happened based on the words he was saying. It is possible that he slipped the tongue and said coon instead of king. Okay. But when you apologize, in his apology, he got to, after that explanation, he said the telltale phrase of not being sorry for what you did. If anyone was offended, if, bruh, I am sorry, what I said was offensive. He probably would not have lost his job had he not said if anyone was offended. He probably could have, even if he lost his job before that, before he made the statement, he could make a case to get his job back with a well-crafted campaign to fix the problem. But when you say if someone was offended, when you say something that is blatantly racist, and if you didn't know when it's pointed out to you that it was blatantly racist, you don't say if someone was offended, because the shit was just offensive. That, again, is right out of the David Duke playbook. And as far as I know, most people I know don't want to be associated with David Duke. The last example, I always like to give three examples. Essay form, you're always going to give, three concise examples. There's a young girl in Florida, took the SAT. I'm not sure if she's a junior or senior, but she did take it the first time as a sophomore. First time she scored a 960, if I'm not mistaken. Second time she scored a 1290. Now, I personally scored a 1080 and a 1290 consecutively back to back, and I took them in the same year. She didn't even take these tests in the same year. This poor child now is under investigation by the state education board. Her college acceptance letters have been held. I have not seen the update, so I apologize if that has changed since then. By all means, please put it in the comments. But the fact that she even got what's concerning to me is that she had to experience racism on a visceral level, and I can tell you the decision to investigate her would definitely be considered racism. And the reason is because it's not uncommon for someone to jump up 300, 400, 500 points, especially if they've gotten SAT classes, especially if they've grown a year and a half and taken other courses that they previously didn't know information on the SAT. If you haven't taken Algebra 2, but you take the SAT while you're taking geometry, you're probably not going to know the answers to the Algebra 2 questions, and at best you'd be guessing. Maybe she didn't answer all the questions this time. Maybe she answered only what she knew. And before, maybe she answered all the questions. I know that's what changed my score, other than, taking the SAT prep course and studying and practicing taking tests. Like, There's a lot of things you can do. In the 90s, there was still things you could do. We didn't necessarily have the full online capabilities we have now, but there was practice tests just with really relatively easy questions just to get you used to taking tests. Arguably, that's what got my score to go up. But you'll never in your life hear about. I haven't, but I can guarantee. Let me rephrase that. It's not that you'll never hear. I'm pretty sure she's not the only one that jumped up more than 200 points after the second time of taking the SAT test. How about that? I can't quantify that. I can't prove it. But based on having taken the SAT, knowing people that have taken it, I know people that have jumped up 500 points. I know someone got a perfect score, and the first time they took it, they did not get a perfect score. They went from low 10 to 16 in 1 year. It's not uncommon. It's called studying and it's called preparation. But the fact that she's going through, they've had her family to hire a lawyer. This has turned into a full blown investigation to where her whole future is in jeopardy because she studied. Because she studied. Because they're accusing her of cheating. So sorry about that. Yeah, I was gonna say she doesn't have to. They don't have to prove she actually cheated. She needs to prove that she didn't. We're not in a court of law. This is a committee that's going to vote and say whether or not that she cheated, based on what she says. That's about as racist as it gets. And they may say that they're trying to protect the integrity. They may very well say that. But the fact that they are investigating her and not every single student that scored over 250 points or more, or 300 points or more higher on the SAT the second time they took it, shows that it's racist. And again, they may not have meant it that way, but the fact that they're questioning it means that it is. It's that T, right? It's that T. I myself, as a black man, have sympathy, if you will. I've caught myself looking at African American, an African American homeless person to get rid of that T, because we all have it. It's not just white people. Black people do it too. You can't help it. It's part of the cake. It's built in. If you watch TV, listen to the radio, you step outside your house, look at a billboard, read a magazine. If you are exposed to any part of our culture in any way, shape, form, or fashion, what we consider common sense or turns of phrases, a lot of them are racist, and it's cumulative, right? It's not. There's no silver bullet that's going to fix these things. It's a cumulative effect of our culture that leads us to where we are. So, what do we do about this? Right? Let me leave you with some hope. First off, if someone tells you something is racist, or they were offended by someone tells you that something's racist and they weren't necessarily offended. And by the way, one of the things I did say the first time I recorded this was that this is based on not just, I didn't just get a bee in my bonnet about this. This is actually, I've been thinking about this for a while because I recently had a conversation about racism with a coworker of mine who I like. We're still friends. It's not that I hate him for asking the questions. Some of the questions he asked, he realized, like, to me, I consider them dumb questions, and he realized that they were dumb questions after the fact. He realized that the question itself was racist. He asked me why are black people always so angry. That's literally that's literally a racist statement because black people are not generally angry. Like, it's just not a thing. You can't even quantify that statement, that question. But it's just what you only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And he realized that shortly thereafter, after I got into the discussing the question with him, how dumb the question was, and he apologized. He's an honest person. But that's where this comes from. And one of the things I told him, when I tell any white person I've ever gotten a conversation about this, is that if someone tells you something's racist, just believe them. Just go default. You know what? I said something racist. You're not going to be hanged for it. Unless you're dropping hard R's and calling, saying things that for a fact are racist. You you know you weren't intending to be racist. Someone tells you did something racist, you don't have to get upset about it. Don't get offended. Just apologize. Holy crap, I didn't know that was racist. And then what you can do is ask a question. That's the best form of finding out anything. Ask a question. Again, you don't know. If you didn't know it was racist, and then someone explains to you race, you didn't know that before. Now you do. The easy way to find out more information is ask the question why. Just why. And for my black brothers and sisters out here, have some patience. Know that not everybody's deliberately trying to be racist or ask you a covertly racist question or makes a covertly racist statement. And you explain it to them, unless they come at you with hard R's, and just some craziness. There's no need to even get upset about it. You know why? Because all you have to do is just explain it to them. Because more than likely, they didn't even realize it. They didn't even know. They probably don't even know where they heard it the first time. Which is like the guy, the weatherman. He's probably heard the term Martin Luther King, and there is a very high possibility he probably doesn't even remember where he heard it. There's also a really high possibility that over the holiday break, he was dropping Martin Luther King's left and right. I mean, that's also possible. But there's a possibility, or hanging around people that say it a lot. And it's very possible that he heard that, didn't even realize that your brain does some crazy things, man. The brain is not infallible. All you have to do is apologize. Honestly, do not say if I offended you, because clearly someone was offended. If they brought it to your attention, it was offensive. There's no if involved. When you say if, and this is not just has to do with racism. When you're apologizing to somebody, never say if I offended you, because you're not acknowledging the fact. You're just trying to find cover for what you said or what you did. It's one of those things. If you break a law, right? You can't say, oh man, if that was against the law, I wouldn't have done it. Well, no, jail. Like, you broke the law. I didn't know. Like, I got a parking ticket. I didn't know I couldn't park there. I can't take that to court and say you're on park there. Like, he's gonna say, well, you did, and you got the ticket, so pay it. That's just how it works. And that's just a little word of advice. Look, all that aside, I'm gonna, just like I say at the end of every video, everybody love everybody. Shout out to Knowing Better. I'm still trying to figure out this whole live streaming thing. Again, I don't do this for any other reason, just to have a conversation. So if you like what you heard, if you have questions, concerns, you don't like and subscribe to the video, like and subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment. I read them. I don't really have that many subscribers. I'm not concerned about that, but hey, if I get more, great. Any money I make off of this, if I do, which is not really the plan, is probably end up being charity money. Like, I have a job, a really good one, so this is more for fun. Also, I'll be doing some more to come. I'm gonna do I didn't really do a review when I got my BMW i3, so I want to get into that. I'm a big proponent of electric vehicles because it's the future, and the technology is amazing. So I definitely want to, give as much information to as many people as possible about that. Also, the moto vlogs will come back as soon as it warms up. It just so happens that when I started doing the moto vlogs, my job got crazy, and then it literally has rained in Maryland more than it has in Seattle, Washington in the last 12 months. Like, we had like almost 80 inches of rain. It rains like every 3 days for some reason. So the ground never really dries out, and every day that I think I'm gonna ride, there's no time to ride because it's raining outside, and I don't ride in I know I can ride in the rain. I just don't feel like it. I don't like getting wet. So and I don't ride in the winter because I don't like being cold. So, the motor vlogs will come back. You know, lots of good stuff, lots of good content. I'm gonna keep doing these little live streams on the way to work, which has kind of been like a cathartic form for me. So we're gonna keep doing that. But other than that, that's all the plugs I have. Check out Knowing Better. Check out Beau of the Fifth Column, Beau of the Fifth Column. I think that's how he spells it. Great channel as well. Once I figure out how to put links and stuff in here, I'll make sure I link in the description. But those are two channels that they're great channels. Great channels. I don't even really need to qualify that statement. They're just amazing channels. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Everybody